Gobbolino, the Witch's Cat. On a dark and cloudy night, two tiny kittens crept out of the cave where they had been born. It was the first time they had set foot outside the cave. It was so dark that Gobbolino could barely see his twin sister, Sutika. She was as black as the night itself. "What do you want to be when you grow up?" asked Gobbolino. "Oh, I'll be a witch's cat like Ma," said Sutika. "I'll learn magic and how to ride a broomstick and turn mice into frogs and frogs into guinea pigs. I'll fly on the night wind with the bats and the owls saying meow, and people will say, 'There goes Sutika, the witch's cat.'" Gobbolino was silent for a long time. Then he said, "I'll be a kitchen cat. I'll sit by the fire with my paws tucked under my chest and purr. When the children of the house come in from school, they'll pull my ears and tickle and tease me. I'll mind the house and chase the mice and watch the baby. And when all the children are in bed, I'll climb onto their mother's lap and they'll call me Gobbolino, the kitchen cat." "Don't you want to be bad?" "No," said Gobbolino. "I want to be good so that people will love me. People don't love a witch's cat." Just then, a ray of moonlight fell across the kittens. Sutika hissed and arched her back. "Brother, brother, one of your paws is white." Everyone knows that witches' kittens are black all over from head to foot, with eyes as green as grass. In the deep, dark cave, nobody had noticed, but now the moonbeam lit up a pure white sock, and his lovely round eyes were blue. Sutika rushed into the cave. "Ma, Gobbolino has a white sock and blue eyes, and he wants to be a kitchen cat." Her mother came to the mouth of the cave. The witch was not far behind. They knocked Gobbolino head over heels, cuffed his ears, pulled his tail, and threw him into the darkest, dampest corner of the cave among the witch's toads. Later he heard the witch talking to his mother. "Sutika will make a clever little witch's cat, but what shall we do with Gobbolino?" When the moon rose, the witch and her cat mounted their broomstick, with the two kittens in a bag behind them. They flew so fast that little Gobbolino, peeping through a hole in the sack, saw the stars flutter past like a shower of diamonds. It made him dizzy to look down. Sutika mewed with joy, but Gobbolino shivered, and tears of terror dropped onto his white front paw. "Oh, please, please stop, please," he cried, but nobody paid any attention. At last, the witch and her broomstick swooped down onto Hurricane Mountain. An ugly old hag lived there who agreed at once to take Sutika and train her to be a witch's cat. Sutika was so happy that she hardly stopped to say goodbye to her little brother. She wanted to begin learning how to turn people into frogs and toads. But the hag refused to take Gobbolino. "A witch's cat with a white paw? No one will want him." So Gobbolino rode away on the broomstick behind his mother and the witch. They visited 50 caves, but none of the other witches wanted Gobbolino because of his white paw and blue eyes. They flew home again, and the witch flung Gobbolino back among the toads. In the morning he woke up and found himself all alone. The witch and his mother had gone. "Suppose they never come back. Oh, what shall I do?" But then an idea struck him. "Now I never have to be a witch's cat. I can go and find a happy home to live in forever and ever." And he stopped crying. The witch's cave was on the edge of a forest, not far from a river. Gobbolino washed his face and coat very carefully, and then trotted through the fields till the forest was out of sight. In front of him was the bubbling river, with bright fishes in it that made his mouth water. Quite soon a lovely trout, pink and gold and blue, swam slowly towards him. Gobbolino trembled with excitement and lifted a front paw. At the same moment, the trout saw him and flashed by with a swish of its tail. The kitten made one wild grab, overbalanced, and tumbled into the water. There was a terrible splash. Then he began to swim, as only a witch's cat can. He swam and swam as the river carried him far from the cave where he was born. He swam until the river ran into farmland. Some children were playing on the bank. "Look, look," they shouted. "There's a kitten out there in the water." "He'll drown," cried one of the girls. "Quick, quick, get him out." The boys ran to the bank with a stick and fished Gobbolino out, dripping wet. "What bright blue eyes! He's got 3 black paws and 1 pure white." The children took Gobbolino home to the farm to show him to their mother, and it had the kind of kitchen little Gobbolino had dreamed of. There were bright pans on the shelves, a blazing fire, and a baby in a cradle. "Wow, what a lucky cat I am," Gobbolino thought. "Now I can settle down and be a kitchen cat forever." The farmer's wife took Gobbolino on her lap and wiped his wet fur with a warm cloth. "Now, where do you come from, little cat? How did you come to fall in the river? You might been drowned." "Wow." When his fur was dry, the farmer's wife gave him a drink of warm milk, and when she went to milk the cows, he played with the children. Every witch's kitten knows all sorts of tricks, and though Gobbolino wanted to be a kitchen cat, he knew them all. He made blue sparks come out of his whiskers and red ones out of his nose, and to the children's delight he made himself invisible, then reappeared, hiding himself in all sorts of strange places. In the middle of all his fun, the farmer came in to tea. He saw Gobbolino's tricks, but said nothing. The children were sent off to their beds, and the little cat curled up in a box under the kitchen table. The fire died down. Gobbolino slept peacefully, dreaming and purring. Then, suddenly, tap, 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 a hobgoblin peered in at the window. Gobbolino sat up and whispered, "Who's there?" "Come and let me in, little cat," said the hobgoblin. Gobbolino sat and stared at him. "What a lovely kitchen! What bright dishes! What a pretty cradle! What a warm fire! Won't you let me come in?" But Gobbolino only sat and stared at him. The hobgoblin began to rattle at the window. "You kitchen cats are all the same. Look at you, all warm and safe. Look at me, lonely and cold outside." When Gobbolino heard this, he remembered being lonely and lost. He trotted to the window. "You can come in and get warm for a little while," he said. The hobgoblin jumped through the window and left dirty, wet footmarks all across the kitchen floor. "How are you? How are your family?" he asked, giving Gobbolino's tail a pull. "My mother has gone away with my mistress the witch," replied Gobbolino, "and my little sister Sutika has been apprenticed to a hag on Hurricane Mountain. I don't know how they are." "Oh ho!" grinned the hobgoblin. "So you're a witch's kitten?" "Oh, no, not anymore. This afternoon I became a kitchen cat, and I'll be a kitchen cat forever and ever." The hobgoblin laughed loudly and turned head over heels. He knocked some knitting off the chair, and it became tangled round the table legs. "Oh, do be careful," cried Gobbolino, but the hobgoblin ran into the larder and shut the door. The kitten trotted round trying to pick up the stitches, but it was no good. The hobgoblin bounced out of the larder. He had eaten all the cream. "Well, I'm going. Good night, little witch's kitten," said the hobgoblin, jumping out of the window. Gobbolino trotted back to his box and slept. Early in the morning, the farmer's wife came downstairs. She found her knitting in a tangle and all the cream stolen from the larder. Written across the floor in milky letters were the words, "Gobbolino is a witch's cat." "Look at this mess," she yelled. "I told you so," said the farmer. "He's a witch's cat, no good to anyone. I'm gonna drown him." When Gobbolino heard the farmer's angry voice, he was out of his box in one bound and out of the kitchen door. across the cobblestones, past the hayricks and up the hill. Yesterday I was a witch's cat, thought Gobbolino. Last night I was a kitchen cat. Now it looks as if I'll have to be some other kind of cat. I wonder what kind it will be. Gobbolino the Kitchen Cat. One dark night, little Gobbolino was trotting along a lonely forest road. Then he saw an old woodcutter walking along in front of him, carrying a heavy load of wood. Feeling lost and lonely, Gobbolino was delighted to see someone, so he followed silently at the woodcutter's heels until they reached a tiny cottage. The old man threw down his bundle of sticks, and only then did he see Gobbolino. "Wow, where did you come from?" he said. "Perhaps you're hungry. Would you like a saucer of milk in my kitchen?" And he opened the door to the cottage. Gobbolino was amazed. In the kitchen stood Rosabelle, the serving girl who had looked after the Lady Alice in the forest tower. She was the woodcutter's granddaughter. "Rosabelle, what are you doing here?" shouted the old man. "Why aren't you with your lady at the tower?" Before she could answer, the girl saw Gobbolino in the doorway. "Send him away!" she screamed. "Send him away! He's a witch's cat. He made the tower fall down and he woke up the dragon. Turn him out, grandfather!" But the woodcutter picked up Gobbolino and spoke to him gently. "Is this true? Are you a witch's cat?" Gobbolino just gave a long, sad meow. The old man could not believe that such a pretty little cat could do anything really bad, and he refused to turn Gobbolino out. And although at first Rosabelle sulked and refused to talk to Gobbolino, after a few days she began to like him. Every morning Gobbolino sat comfortably in a chair while Rosabelle washed the dishes and cooked the dinner. And every evening she would ask her grandfather for money to buy a new dress. She begged and pleaded so much that at last he gave her a silver coin. Now Rosabelle had to wait for the peddler woman to pass the cottage selling her silks and satins. A few days later the peddler woman arrived. "Come in by my fire and have a cup of tea and show me your wares," said Rosabelle. The woman laughed as she tied up her donkey outside the cottage door. There was something about her cackle that made Gobbolino prick up his ears and look at her closely. "Only witches laugh like that and have such long, crooked noses," he thought. At last, Rosabelle chose a material the colour of pure gold, so bright that it glittered in the sunlight. "How much would it cost to make a dress of this beautiful gold satin?" she asked. "2 silver pieces," said the witch. "But I only have one." "What? Do you think I can give it away?" And the witch began gathering up her things. "Stop, wait. Won't you take something in exchange?" begged the girl. "Won't you take my silver piece and one of these cakes? Or my silk bedspread? Or our cuckoo clock?" "Ha ha ha ha!" laughed the old woman. "I eat wild berries and I sleep in ditches and I tell the time by the sun and the moon. Don't offer me cakes or bedspreads or clocks. But there is just one thing I will take in exchange, my dear. Give me that handsome cat and the silver piece, and you can have the satin." "But the cat belongs to my grandfather," said Rosabelle. "He would never forgive me if I gave away Gobbolino." "Oh, never mind. I will be at the wooden hut on the edge of the forest for 3 days if you change your mind." For the next 2 days, Rosabelle was very bad-tempered. But then she suddenly changed. She poured Gobbolino out a saucer of cream and whispered, "Beautiful Gobbolino, look at this. It's my best velvet bag. Wouldn't it make a handsome bed for you?" How kind, thought Gobbolino. How wrong of me to think that she was bad-tempered. And he hopped inside the bag at once. The moment he was inside, Rosabelle drew the strings tight so that he could not get out. "Aha! Now I can have my gold dress. I'll tell Grandfather you ran away." And she hurried through the forest with the velvet bag until she reached the hut. The old woman was just packing up to leave. "Oh, she croaked. "I knew you would come." She took the bag and hung it on the donkey's saddle, and gave Rosabelle the gold satin in exchange for Gobbolino and the silver coin. For weeks, Gobbolino travelled through dreary witch country where the sun never shone. Then the peddler woman paid a visit to a friend of hers who lived in a cave high on a mountain. At the mouth of the cave sat a young black cat with eyes as green as grass. It was Gobbolino's twin sister, Sutika. The little cats were very glad to see each other. They shared a bowl of soup cooked in the witch's cauldron, and Sutika showed Gobbolino all the witch's cat tricks she had learned. She made strange music come out of the cauldron, and flying pigs swoop about the cave. She made the witch invisible, and for a moment turned Gobbolino bright red. "Now show us some of your tricks, Gobbolino." "He can't do anything at all," sneered the old peddler woman. "A few sparks, a bit of disappearing, the odd prank, but he refuses to do anything bad." "It's true," said Gobbolino. "I never wanted to be a witch's cat. Witches' cats are bad, 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 and witches' spells are so cruel." "Miserable cat!" shrieked the witch. "Cruel? What kind of word is that for a witch's cat?" And she picked him up and hurled him into the cauldron. He sank and bobbed and gasped, and all the magic that made him a witch's cat washed off in the witch's brew. "Jump up behind me, brother," said Sutika as she mounted a broomstick. Gobbolino struggled out of the cauldron and onto the broom. It soared up, 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 higher and higher above Hurricane Mountain. "Oh, thank you for saving me, Sutika," sobbed Gobbolino. "Thank you." "No need for thanks," said Sutika. "After all, you are my brother. But you're a disgrace to the family, and I never want to see you again. I'm going to drop you now. It's time I was going home." The next moment she cried, "Jump!" and gave Gobbolino a little push with her paw. Down, down, down he fell, until he splashed into a cold river. "Oh, I'm drowning," cried Gobbolino. As a witch's kitten he had swum like a fish, but now he found he could only struggle and flap the water. Luckily, some children were playing on the bank. "Look, look," they cried, "a little cat! Quick, quick, get it out!" The boys ran to get a stick and fished out Gobbolino all dripping wet. "Oh," they cried, "it's Gobbolino, the kitten we rescued ages ago. Can you still blow sparks out your nose? Can you still become invisible?" He shook his head sadly, but the children still hugged him and carried him home. "Look what we found drowning in the river," they said to their father. "The witch's kitten has come back again." "Witches' kittens swim, they don't drown," he said. Then he took Gobbolino out of their hands and looked at him very carefully. "This isn't a witch's kitten," he said. "It's a common kitchen cat." "Can we keep him then?" "I don't see why not." One by one, the delighted children went off to bed. The farmer's wife gave Gobbolino a saucer of cream. Then he crept onto her lap and dozed. At last, after so many strange adventures, Gobbolino was happy and content. He had found a home forever. He was Gobbolino, the kitchen cat. Gobbolino the Knight's Cat. Gobbolino was sitting sadly by the roadside when he heard the clop, clop, clop of a horse approaching. A fine horse was coming along the road, but the knight who sat astride it was pale and sad. The horse shied at the sight of Gobbolino, nearly throwing the knight off. "Good day to you, little cat," said the knight. "And what are you doing on the king's highway? You're a very pretty cat. Why don't you jump up on my horse and come with me?" As they rode along, the knight told Gobbolino why he was so sad. He said he was in love with the beautiful Lady Alice, but she had been shut up in a high tower by her father until she made up her mind which of two suitors she would marry. One was the knight himself, and the other was the Black Baron who lived in a castle nearby. Both suitors went to visit her every day and took her wonderful presents. The Lady Alice had promised to marry the man whose present the other man could not guess. Every day the Black Baron would guess what present the sad knight had brought, and every day the sad knight would guess what present the Baron had brought. Now the tower stood in the middle of a wood, and it was guarded by a huge dragon. The dragon was old and lazy, but Gobbolino had never seen a dragon before, and he was more than a little frightened when he saw the green coils of the monster wrapped around the bottom of the tower. The knight, holding Gobbolino on his arm, knocked boldly on the door of the tower. The lazy dragon opened one eye and looked at them, but he did not move. Rosabelle, serving maid to the Lady Alice, ran down the stairs and opened the door. "Is my lady alone?" asked the knight. "Why, yes, sir, she is. The Baron left half an hour ago, and he brought the loveliest set of ivory balls you ever saw." Gobbolino could see now how the suitors found it so easy to guess each other's presents. The knight and Gobbolino followed Rosabelle up the stairs to the top of the tower, where the Lady Alice sat beside her spinning wheel, looking out over the forest. "Oh, what a pretty little cat," she cried. "Do let him come and sit on my lap." Gobbolino leapt onto her lap and sat there purring. "Stay with me forever, little cat," the Lady Alice whispered. "It's so lonely here in the tower, with nobody but my serving maid and the silly knight and the stupid Baron and that lazy dragon to talk to. I've never had such a pretty gift before." Sitting at the feet of the Lady Alice, Gobbolino thought that he had never been so contented before in his life. The next morning, the Lady Alice leaned out of her window and cried, "I can see the Baron coming. Go and let him in, Rosabelle, but don't say what present the knight brought me yesterday." Gobbolino, who knew that Rosabelle would tell the Baron about him, slipped out of the room behind her and hissed in her ear, "If you tell the Baron about me, Rosabelle, I'll turn you into gingerbread, and the dragon will eat you up." The Black Baron thundered on the tower door, and Rosabelle opened it. But she would not say a word about the knight's present. So the Baron came up the stairs in a very bad temper, for Rosabelle had never failed to tell him before. "The knight brought you a pair of pigeons, I suppose," he said to the Lady Alice. "Oh, dear me, no. And if you don't guess in 2 more days, I'll marry him and not you." When night fell, the Lady Alice brought out her harp. The music grew sadder and sadder, till at last she burst into tears. "Oh, Gobbolino, what is to become of me? Now I'll have to marry the knight, and I don't want to marry either of them. I'm in love with a noble young lord, but he went to the wars, and now my father says that I must marry one of these stupid men. What shall I do?" The Baron arrived the next morning with 5 gold coins for Rosabelle, but still she would not tell him about the knight's present. "Oh, no," she sobbed, "I dare not. The present would turn me into gingerbread and scratch me with its claws." "It's a cat!" shouted the Baron. "A witch's cat!" Just then the knight arrived at the door. Both suitors ran up the stairs with Rosabelle sobbing behind them. "It's a witch's cat!" shouted the Baron. "Rosabelle told you," cried the knight. "It'll cast a spell on us all," said the Baron as he reached the top. "I claim your hand, Lady Alice," said the knight. But before she could answer, the Baron drew out his sword and a terrific fight began. At that moment, a bugle call sounded through the forest and a horse and rider galloped towards the tower. "It's my young lord!" cried Lady Alice as she darted to the stairs. Rosabelle followed her, jumped over the dragon and ran home sobbing. But the Lady Alice ran to meet her young lover, who lifted her onto his saddle and galloped back into the forest. Upstairs, the knight and the Baron were still fighting, and with all the noise, the dragon started to wake up. The tower began to rock as he slowly uncoiled himself and stretched. Then, with a tremendous yawn, he opened his mouth and roared. Gobbolino barely had time to leap clear before the whole tower crashed down around the Baron and the knight, still fighting among the ruins. Gobbolino escaped just in time, and he ran away from the tower as fast as he could. "I've been a kitchen cat, and a show cat, and a ship's cat, and now a knight's cat. It was fun being a kitchen cat. I wonder if I'll be one again." And he trotted out of the forest to look for a new home. Gobbolino, the ship's cat. Trotting along the dusty road, little Gobbolino wondered what adventures awaited him. He had been born a witch's cat. Only yesterday he'd been happy to be a kitchen cat. Now he had to find some other kind of life. By evening he came to a busy town. The lights in the windows winked at him like yellow friendly eyes. In 100 happy homes fires crackled and fat, comfortable cats dozed under chairs. But Gobbolino belonged to nobody, and nobody belonged to Gobbolino. He jumped onto a windowsill and peeped inside. All the way round the room were dozens of large cages, and in each cage, sitting on a blue velvet cushion, was a cat. An old man stood at the table cutting up meat onto 12 blue plates. The cat's coats were glossy, their eyes bright, their whiskers clean. Gobbolino could hear them purring even through the window. They looked very content and cared for, he thought. But nobody who has so many cats can possibly want another. The next minute, the door opened wide and a voice called, "Pussy, Pussy, pretty Pussy, come here." "Oh, he really is calling me." The old man picked up Gobbolino and put him into an empty cage with a velvet cushion and a plate of meat. After a while, Gobbolino spoke to the cat in the next cage. "What are we all doing in cages?" "Don't you know?" she sneered. "You're a show cat now." In the morning, the old man brushed and combed his cats one by one. He was a little surprised by the coloured sparks that flew from Gobbolino's coat, but he didn't stop telling him how beautiful he was. Such fur, such a tail, such colouring, and such beautifully blue eyes. The other cats growled. "Ah, they're jealous," said the little old man as he tied a red ribbon round Gobbolino's neck. "What's all the fuss about?" Gobbolino asked the cat next door. "Don't you know?" she said scornfully. "Tomorrow is the cat show and we're all going." Long before they arrived, Gobbolino could hear the mewing of hundreds and hundreds of show cats. Big cats, little cats, black cats, white cats, tabby cats, Persian cats, fat cats, thin cats, handsome cats, ugly cats, and all the old man's cats. And Gobbolino, the witch's kitten, with his beautifully blue eyes. The other cats began to whisper. "Who's that odd-looking black cat? He wasn't here last year." "No, he's new. To tell you the truth." Though Gobbolino could not hear what she said, a kind of hiss went round the cages. "Gobbolino, Gobbolino, Gobbolino." The judges went past, looking at the cats. After a while, they brought coloured cards and pinned them onto the cats. The one next door to Gobbolino had a red card with "First Prize" written on it. The cat opposite had a blue one. The old man trotted among the cages, stroking his prize winners and promising them all kinds of good things for supper. Then the chief judge stood up to name the best cat in the show. It was Gobbolino. For a moment there was a silence, then a hissing, then a spitting, then a yowling. The angry cats yowled on till one great roar arose from every cage. "Gobbolino is a witch's cat!" Round and round the cages ran the angry murmur. "Gobbolino is a witch's cat!" At the sound of the hissing and the spitting, the judges turned pale. "Why, oh why was I born a witch's cat?" said Gobbolino, cowering in his cage. "I don't want to win prizes. I only want a home. What's going to happen to me now?" The old man was told to leave at once and take his cats with him. Outside, he opened the door of Gobbolino's cage and dropped him into the road. "Miserable creature, be off with you. I don't ever want to see your face again." He put all the other cats onto his cart, whipped the scraggy pony, and galloped away in a cloud of dust. Gobbolino was not sorry to see them go. He'd not really enjoyed being a show cat, and living in a cage had become very boring. "I'm sure there's a home somewhere where I'll be welcome," he thought. Leaving the town far behind him, Gobbolino trotted south towards the sea. He passed through towns and villages, past cottages and farms. But there was no welcome anywhere for Gobbolino. So his heart bounded when he saw the silver, sparkling sea and the ships with their brown sails. He sat on the quay in the sunshine, watching the ships and the gulls and the sailors. Presently, a mouse ran out of a pile of ropes. With a pat of his paw, Gobbolino killed it. "Well done," said a voice behind him. And there was a young sailor watching him with a friendly smile. "There are a lot of mice on my ship, the Mary Maud, and we haven't got a ship's kitten. Would you like to come and catch them for us?" At last, here's somebody who really needs me, he thought. "I'm sure I'll be happy at sea. Gobbolino the ship's cat." They sailed through sunny oceans, past islands, coral reefs, and clear lagoons. But one morning the sky darkened. Wind rippled the calm blue water. The shadow of a sea witch was crossing the sun. The sailor saw her flying up in the sky, but thought she was a seagull. By nightfall, a storm was raging, and the waves were as high as mountains. The Mary Maud plunged up and down while the wind shrieked and the timbers creaked. The seas crashed onto the decks. Twice Gobbolino was saved from being washed overboard. At night, the storm grew louder and fiercer. "Oh, will it never end?" thought Gobbolino as he rolled from side to side. In the morning, the storm was still raging, but now Gobbolino heard a new sound. The song of the sea witch. "I'll send her down the Mary Maud, and every man on her aboard. For not a sailor here can tell the way to break a witch's spell." An old memory stirred in Gobbolino. He remembered long, long ago lying in his witch's cave and hearing the words, "There's only one way to break a witch's spell. You must pounce on her shadow and shout, 'Fiddlesticks!'" Nobody saw the little cat climb up the ship's ropes to the crow's nest. He had to hang on very tight. Showers of spray soaked his fur and filled his eyes. Great clouds covered the sun, so the sea witch cast no shadow. Suddenly, the clouds rolled back and the sun moved into a patch of blue sky. The sailors caught sight of Gobbolino high up above them and heard his voice. "Mistress, oh mistress," he cried above the storm, "don't you know me? I'm Gobbolino, the witch's kitten. Don't leave me here to drown on this miserable ship." The sea witch heard him. "Is it true? What are you doing on board the Mary Maud?" "The sailors took me aboard. I couldn't escape." "Witches' kittens can swim like seals," said the sea witch as she crept nearer and nearer the ship. "Jump into the sea and swim. When the ship has gone down, I'll pick you up on my broomstick and take you home again." "It's so far and so deep," sobbed Gobbolino. "I'm afraid. Oh, I'm falling." "Oh, all right," snapped the witch. "Be ready to jump onto my broomstick as I pass." Just as the sunlight began to fade, the sea witch swooped past. Her shadow fell for one moment on the deck. Gobbolino sprang, not onto her broomstick, but right onto her shadow, shouting loudly, "Fiddlesticks!" as he landed. With a shriek of rage, the sea witch disappeared. "Traitor! Traitor!" she cried as the wind swallowed her up. Suddenly, a dead calm fell on the sea. The Mary Maud was safe. But the sailors didn't understand. They whispered together about Gobbolino. "It wasn't a seagull, it was a witch. He's talking to her. I heard him. He said he was a witch's kitten. No wonder she followed the ship." So they stared at Gobbolino, and none of them wanted to pick him up or stroke him any more. The cat sat on the deck, lonely and sad. At midday, the captain came to talk to him. "Gobbolino," he said kindly, "I'm afraid we must say goodbye. My sailors refuse to work until you leave. It's just unlucky to have a witch's cat aboard a ship." Gobbolino nodded, and the captain himself rowed the little cat ashore. The sailors gave Gobbolino a cheer, but he could not bear to look back and see the Mary Maud setting sail without him. So he hurried bravely along, thinking to himself, "Never mind. Someone is bound to want little Gobbolino soon." One evening in late summer, Gobbolino the kitchen cat was basking on the steps of his happy home, listening to the sounds of the farmyard. "How lucky I am to have such a wonderful home," he thought, "and I hardly deserve it, for I was born a witch's cat." As the rim of the sun dipped behind the far-off purple mountains, an owl flew silently up the lane and dropped a leaf on the farmhouse steps. The little cat lifted his paw, and in the last rays of sunshine saw some words written across the leaf. "Please come and help me, brother. Oh, please do. Oh, do." For a moment, Gobbolino's heart almost stopped beating. There was only one person in the world who had the right to call him brother, and that was his little sister, Sutika. Gobbolino shivered as he remembered the days he had spent on Hurricane Mountain when he was still a witch's cat. He had longed to leave the witch's cavern and be an ordinary kitchen cat with a home of his own, but Sutika had been very happy learning how to cast wicked spells and inventing naughty tricks to play on people. What could have happened to make her call for help? All night long her message ran in Gobbolino's ears, and by morning he knew that he must leave the farmhouse and go to help her. It broke his heart to leave, but just as the clock struck 7, he crept silently out of the farmyard and set off for Hurricane Mountain. The mountains were a great way off, and Gobbolino walked a very long way until he came upon a little wooden horse grazing in a small green glade. Greeting one another, Gobbolino asked the little horse if he was resting from a long journey. "Oh, no. I live close by with my master, Uncle Peda, the toy maker, and his wife." "Do you think your master has a shed where I could spend the night?" asked Gobbolino. "I'm very tired and have had nothing to eat all day." "Jump on my back and I'll take you home at once. I'm sure my mistress will give you something nice to eat and a comfortable bed." Gobbolino was only too grateful to jump on the back of his kind friend, and before very long they arrived at a white-painted house. A tall, handsome old man and a rosy-faced woman were sitting inside. They smiled happily when they saw the little wooden horse, and before many minutes had gone by, Gobbolino was lapping a saucer of rich yellow milk. He was then lifted gently onto a cushion by the fire and asked where he was going. He told his new friends that he was on his way to Hurricane Mountain to help his sister Sutika, a witch's cat. "Your sister's a witch's cat?" the old woman asked in horror. "Then what are you?" "I'm a kitchen cat," said Gobbolino. "And a good cat if ever I saw one," said Uncle Pedar. "He's also a cat who needs my help," said the little wooden horse. "I'll go with him as far as the open plain and show him the way." Uncle Pedar and his wife agreed that the little wooden horse should do this. So early next morning, the two friends set out through the forest. Gobbolino trotted along until the little wooden horse persuaded him to ride. At last it seemed the trees were thinning out. Hurricane Mountain did not look so far away after all. "I'll get there by evening," said Gobbolino, leading his friend onto a vast plain. They trotted along quickly until they reached a stream. They were just lowering their heads to drink when Gobbolino heard a strange noise in the distance. "It sounds like wild birds crying," he said. "Only different, quite different. Can't you hear it?" The little wooden horse raised his head and sniffed the air. "I can," he said. "I think we ought to go back to the forest as quickly as we can." "What?" exclaimed Gobbolino in horror. "When we have come so far? We're more than halfway to the mountains already." The little wooden horse jumped to his feet and stood looking westward with his ears pricked. "I really do think we should go back to the forest," he repeated. "What are you afraid of?" asked Gobbolino in astonishment. "Supposing it's dogs." "Dogs?" screeched Gobbolino, jumping 3 feet into the air. Together they crouched and listened to every sound that came across the plain, but there came only the trilling of larks above, the bubbling of the water, and the chirping of a water bird. "I must go on if I'm to reach the mountains before sunset," said Gobbolino. "But you, my friend, must go home. It's time we said goodbye." "Very well, Gobbolino. I'll do as you say. I'll go home to my master and mistress and wish you the very best of luck and protection from every danger, for I'm very much afraid there will be danger." Gobbolino thanked the little horse over and over again for helping him. Then, with tears in their eyes, the two friends set off in opposite directions. Gobbolino trotted on for more than an hour, then heard that strange sound again. It was the sound of a pack of hounds baying. Gobbolino's heart began to thump, and he quickened his pace. The pack was sweeping up the plain, and there was not a rock or a tree where he could hide. Just ahead, he saw a village and began to run towards it, hoping he might find shelter there before the hounds overtook him. Gasping with terror, Gobbolino fled across the plain as the baying grew louder and louder. And then he heard another sound, a rattling and a clattering that pursued him with snorts and blowings and the thunder of spinning wheels. Gobbolino was about to fall flat on his face from sheer fright when a familiar voice panted in his ear. "Jump on my back, Gobbolino! Jump, I tell you! Jump!" The little wooden horse overtook him at full gallop, and with a desperate leap, Gobbolino gained the painted saddle and clung on tight. Together they sped along like a streak of lightning, with the hounds gaining on them fast. "Put me down and let me run," pleaded Gobbolino, but even side by side they could not outpace the hounds. When both were at the end of their strength and about to turn and face the pack, they arrived suddenly at the gate of an ancient church. and slipping quickly through the gate, they found themselves in a deserted churchyard. As the first shade of evening crept across the plain, Gobbolino and the little wooden horse, pursued by a pack of baying hounds, sought refuge in the deserted churchyard. Suddenly, an old priest opened the church door, and the two friends flew towards him. The next moment there was a fearful clanging of bells. A crowd of terrified bats flew out of the church tower, and the hounds turned tail and fled, howling. "Ah, my little cat," said the old priest, stooping down and stroking Gobbolino. "I think the haunted church has saved your life." "Haunted?" asked Gobbolino and the little horse, struggling to recover their breath. "Yes, you heard for yourselves the terrible clamour of the bells, though nobody rings them. None of the villagers will come to the church any more." At first the two friends were too shaken to tell the priest their story, but as they recovered they asked him if they might stay overnight. "Why, yes, of course you can stay. I would invite you to spend the night in my house, but cats make my housekeeper feel quite unwell. However, I know she will give you some food." The priest went away and soon returned with a bowl of bread and milk. "I hope you have a good night's sleep." When they finished their supper, Gobbolino and the little wooden horse decided to spend the night in the bell tower, for they were afraid that the hounds might brave the ghosts and enter the church. Wearily they climbed the winding stairs, until reaching the top, they saw hundreds and hundreds of bats clinging to the bell ropes with their wings folded one across the other. Suddenly, one of the bats called, "It's time to get up, brothers! Now, now!" With a terrible clamour, every bat left the bell ropes and dived below into the body of the church. Round and round they flew, up and over the organ, in and out of the pulpit, while above and around them the peal of bells filled every corner of the building. Gobbolino and the little wooden horse cowered against the wall, overwhelmed by the dreadful noise and the flurry of whirling black bodies. But at last the bats disappeared, and the two friends, exhausted by their day's adventures, fell fast asleep. When they woke up, they were surprised to find the bats had returned very quietly. Gobbolino yawned and stretched, then turned to speak to them. "Gentlemen," he said, "do you realize how much trouble you are causing by making the bells ring every night? The villagers think the church is haunted. Wouldn't you prefer to have another home?" "Why, yes, we would," said the bats. "It's very noisy and crowded here." "Up in Hurricane Mountain, where I used to live, there are hundreds of empty caves. There's room for thousands of bats." "Are you sure? Do you promise?" asked the bats. "I am sure, and I promise. But you will have to enter the caves quietly, because a witch lives in the highest cave, and if you annoy her, she might turn you into something horrid." Two by two, the bats left the ropes and vanished in the early dawn towards Hurricane Mountain. Later that morning, a very happy priest said goodbye to Gobbolino and the little wooden horse. "I can hardly believe it," he said. "Who would have thought that the haunting which terrified the village was nothing more than the bats jumping off the bell ropes? I will always be grateful to you, my good little friends." So the two again set off for Hurricane Mountain to find Gobbolino's twin sister Sutika. The way was long and difficult. But eventually they saw that they were within reach of the great purple mountain. They did not notice the small black cloud which was forming over the peaks, a cloud that circled and quivered and gradually became bigger and bigger. The cloud began to advance towards them, and at the same time there was a high, screaming sound. The little wooden horse looked up to see the cloud swoop lower and lower till it was flying just above the level of the plain. In an instant he knew what it was. The bats were coming back. "After them! After them! Revenge! Revenge!" screamed the bats as they dived on the two friends. Both instinctively ducked their heads, and the next minute they were in the center of a whirling mass of raking claws and flashing teeth. Gobbolino bit and scratched and tore, and the little wooden horse battered. Soon they were surrounded by wounded bats, but still more bats dived down row upon row. At last there was a lull in the fighting, and the little wooden horse jumped on his hind legs and shouted, "Stop! Stop! Tell us why you're so angry!" "Promises! Promises!" hissed the bats. "Empty promises and lies! No sooner had we found a home for our families than we were driven out again and again by that wicked witch's cat. Now we'll have to go back to the church." "Wait, please wait," Gobbolino begged them. "I'm on my way to help my sister Sutika, the witch's cat. Perhaps in exchange for my help, she will allow you into the caves." The bats became calmer and agreed that this was a much better idea than going back to the church. A number of them hooked their wings together to form two flying hammocks. Gobbolino and the little wooden horse climbed into the hammocks and flew with the bats to the foot of Hurricane Mountain. Leaving the bats to spend the night in rabbit burrows, the two friends began the steep climb to the summit. The path wound up and up. The sun went down, and the mountains looked dark and angry. Soon they came across an empty cave and decided to sleep there until morning. They woke to find the cave full of moonlight. Standing in the middle was a small black cat with a suspicious, fierce face and flashing green eyes. "Sister! My sister Sutika!" Gobbolino cried. "Is it really you?" The two cats fell upon each other, licking and purring. "I came as soon as the owl brought your message," said Gobbolino. "Why did you send for me, sister?" Sutika's green eyes filled with tears. "I want to be a kitchen cat," she sobbed. "I'm tired of being a witch's cat, being wicked from dawn to dark. I don't enjoy it anymore. I want to be good like you." "But will the witch allow you to leave?" asked Gobbolino, almost sobbing himself. "Oh, no! Never, never, never! I must go while she's asleep. In the early morning, perhaps, after she's been out all night." "But what if she were to wake up and find you gone?" shouted Gobbolino. "Oh, she would chase me," chuckled Sutika, her eyes drying. "But if I passed through running water, she wouldn't catch me. Witches can't pass through running water, but witches' cats can. And this is how you can help me, brother," said Sutika, half closing her eyes. "My mistress is old and almost blind. She would never know if for a few hours you took my place, just long enough for me to reach the stream that runs across the plain." Gobbolino trembled at the idea. But how could he refuse to help his sister? And then there were the bats. If he helped Sutika to escape, they would move into the caves and leave the church in peace. There was no alternative. The next morning, he would have to return to the witch's terrible cave. daylight was streaming into the cave when Gobbolino and the little wooden horse woke and saw Sutika in the entrance. She was bursting with indignation. "Ah, so you're still here," she cried, flashing her bright green eyes. "You said you'd come and save me, and you've already left me to my fate." "Oh, no, sister, indeed I haven't," cried Gobbolino, springing up and rubbing the sleep out of his eyes. I'm ready. "Then give me your one white paw, brother." Gobbolino held out his paw, and Sutika rubbed it with dirt. In a minute or two, Gobbolino's paws were all as black as one another. "Now you have 4 black paws, just like mine," said Sutika. "Remember, the witch is almost blind. If you keep your eyes half shut, she'll never notice that they're blue rather than green. She'll probably never see you at all because she always sleeps until sunset." Sutika and Gobbolino ran out of the cave, and together they galloped up the steep path to the summit of Hurricane Mountain. The little wooden horse was not far behind them. Suddenly, Sutika turned to him and hissed, Go back! Your wooden wheels make such a noise. My mistress will wake up and hear you coming." Very crestfallen, the little wooden horse stopped. Then he carefully turned round and slowly went back down the path. It seemed to him that the 2 little cats had been gone for hours, when suddenly Sutika shot past him. "I'm off!" she cried with a wild laugh of triumph. "And my brother has taken my place. With luck he'll join you at midday in the cave below, and you can both follow me to the stream. Be very careful. Goodbye. If it seemed a long time to the little wooden horse, it seemed 10 times as long to Gobbolino, curled up in a dark corner of the witch's cave beside the ugly old woman. He shrank into the shadows among the cobwebs and dust, hoping she would not notice him if she woke up. Sutika had assured him that the witch would sleep until sunset. But it was not even midday when her snoring became lighter and quicker, and then suddenly stopped altogether. Gobbolino froze with terror as he heard her shuffle her feet. She was getting up. "Sutika," she muttered. "Sutika, where are you?" She walked round and round the cave, grumbling and calling for her cat. "Come on, cat, Sutika." At last, she found her stick and went tap, tap, tap across the floor, prodding and poking in the corners. Suddenly, as she passed Gobbolino for the 3rd time, she gave him a painful prod in the ribs. "So there you are," she cried, "you lazy, good-for-nothing creature. Why didn't you answer when I called you? Feel if the water in the cauldron is getting hot. I want it ready and boiling by nightfall." Gobbolino thought it best to obey her. He crept up to the cauldron and nervously put a paw on the rim. "Not like that, you lazy cat. Get up on your hind legs and feel the water inside it." The witch came to stand over him while he dipped his right paw into the bubbling liquid. "Not that paw!" screeched the witch. "Will you never remember what I taught you? You must always stir a spell with your left paw. Go on then. Tell me if it's getting hot." Gobbolino was forced to do as she said, and almost immediately the dirt was washed off his paw. It gleamed pure white in the murky cave. The witch stared at it and gasped with horror. "Sutika? Sutika? Why, you wretched little impostor! You're not my cat at all!" "I'm sorry, ma'am," gasped Gobbolino, expecting to be hurled down Hurricane Mountain at any moment. But the witch was gazing at him thoughtfully. "White paw, blue eyes," she muttered. Why, I do believe you are the brother of my own good-for-nothing cat, and once, long ago, you were both together in my cavern. Am I right, cat? Yes, if you please. Ma'am, said Gobbolino, lowering his beautiful blue eyes to the floor. Then what are you doing here now? And where is Sutika? Thundered the witch. Have you seen her? Yes, I've seen her, confessed Gobbolino. And where is she now? I'm sorry, ma'am. She's gone. I see it all, raged the witch. My cat has deserted me, and she has put you in her place to deceive me while she escaped. Isn't that true? Yes, ma'am, said Gobbolino, trembling and expecting to be destroyed at any minute. But the witch sat down on her chair and rocked herself to and fro with grief. Why did she leave me? Oh, why? She moaned. I trained her to become the best witch's cat in the world. Why should she want to leave me here alone, now that I'm old and getting helpless? Wasn't I wicked enough for her? The witch sobbed and cried so bitterly that Gobbolino began to feel sorry for her. I think my sister got tired of being a witch's cat and wants to be good for a change. Good? Shrieked the witch, startled. How could she be good? She was born and bred a witch's cat. What shall I do? Oh, what shall I do? She sobbed over and over again. How could she break my old heart? Gobbolino was so overcome with pity that he crept onto her lap. Slowly, the sun crossed the sky and moved across the rocks. Gobbolino knew that it was long past midday and that Sutika must now be safely on the other side of the stream. But his fur was still damp with the witch's tears, and he could not find it in his heart to leave her just yet. Gobbolino dozed off and slept for a couple of hours. When he awoke, the cave entrance was golden with afternoon sunshine, and he could hear someone coming up the hill. It was the little wooden horse. Gobbolino leapt to the floor and joyfully ran to meet him. "Oh, my friend, he purred. "Come along, come this instant," said the little wooden horse. "We must leave immediately while the witch is still asleep." No, said Gobbolino. "You don't understand. The poor old lady is breaking her heart at the loss of Sutika. I can't possibly run away and leave her all alone. You go back, my friend, and tell my family that I will return in a few days." Suddenly, the witch sat bolt upright on her chair and stared straight at the little wooden horse. "And what in the name of all wonders can you be?" she exclaimed. "This is my friend, ma'am," said Gobbolino in some agitation. He was afraid the witch might turn the little wooden horse into something dreadful or throw him down the mountainside. But instead, she offered the two friends some food. "Make yourselves at home," she said. "I have to go out for an hour or two." She tottered out of the cave into the gathering darkness, dragging her broomstick behind her. The two friends lay down together beside the fire. "There's nothing wicked about the witch now," said Gobbolino. "She's just an unhappy old woman." But when the witch came back, she was no longer unhappy, but chuckling with glee. "Nobody can leave me now," she gloated. "I have painted a magic ring with my broomstick all the way round the foot of the mountain. Anyone who tries to cross it will frizzle, and nothing will be seen of them again." We will all live happily together, my dear little friends, forever and ever. As daylight faded and the stars appeared in the sky, the witch became more and more cheerful. She tried to tempt Gobbolino and the little wooden horse with all sorts of tasty food from her cauldron, but the two little friends were not hungry. All they could think of was the magic circle round the bottom of the mountain. The witch had told them that anyone who tried to cross it would frizzle and never be heard of again. "I am going out for the night on my broomstick," she said, and with a cackle flew out of the cave. The moment she was gone, Gobbolino dragged the witch's book of spells into a pool of moonlight. Together, the two friends began to read. They read every page until at the very end they came to some lines in tiny print. "To undo a spell, use 8 parts clean spring water and 4 parts fresh fruit juice and 8 parts clean new milk. Mix all together and stir with a clean left hand, together with the blessing of a good man and 5 tears of true sorrow. Splash this on the spell and it shall be broken." The little wooden horse skipped for joy. "We can make the mixture and break the magic circle," he cried. "Wait, wait," warned Gobbolino. "We may find the spring water, the milk, and the fruit juice, but what about the good man's blessing and the tears? Perhaps our friend the old priest could bring us the blessing. We can ask the bats to fly over the magic circle and take him a message. You wait here, Gobbolino." The little wooden horse set off down the mountainside, and soon he arrived at the bats' caves. The bats thought they were the best homes in the world, now that Sutika no longer tried to chase them away. "We could not go back to the church, even if we wanted to," they said. "Somebody has put a magic circle round the mountain, and we could not fly over it without being frizzled. The only trouble is that 2 or 3 of the younger bats lagged behind, and now they can't join us. They are still living in the rabbit burrows outside." The little wooden horse walked towards the few bats he could see whirling and tumbling in the moonlight at the edge of the plain beyond the magic barrier. "Listen to me," he called. "With your help, the magic circle can be broken, and you can come to live in the caves. All you have to do is to take a message to the old priest. Tell him that Gobbolino and I are trapped on Hurricane Mountain by a terrible magic. We need his blessing to break it." The young bats did not want to return to the church, but finally one of them agreed to go. She arrived in the grey light of dawn just as the priest was unlocking the door. She flew down and perched on the priest's shoulder. Then, to his amazement, she began to twitter in his ear. At first, the twittering made no sense, but gradually the priest began to hear the words blessing and Gobbolino. He could not understand much more, but he could see that the bat was nervous and worried. And then he remembered meeting Sutika the previous day. She had paused for breath as she ran past the church and told him how Gobbolino had taken her place with the witch. "If he is lucky, he'll escape too before the witch finds out. that I think I should get to the other side of the stream. You see, witches can't cross over running water. Once I'm on the other side, I'll be safe. If all goes according to plan, Gobbolino will meet me there. He should come past here about midday." But Gobbolino had not come past at midday. Perhaps the plan had gone wrong. Perhaps the bat was trying to tell him that the little cat needed his help. If Gobbolino has not come by noon, the priest decided, I will set out for Hurricane Mountain. On the mountain, Gobbolino and the little wooden horse were busy collecting all the things they needed to break the spell. The witch had returned at dawn and had immediately fallen asleep. She was snoring loudly. They found an empty pumpkin, which would make a good mixing bowl for the ingredients. They pushed it into the darkest corner of the cave. Then, taking 2 jugs and a small clay cup, they walked out onto the mountainside. They met some wild goats who willingly filled the clay cup 8 times with milk and showed them the way to a valley full of bilberry bushes. By mid-afternoon, they had crushed enough berries to fill the cup 4 times over with fruit juice. Then, as the sun went down, they found a spring which supplied the 8 measures of clean water. With both jugs full to the brim, the 2 friends began to stumble back to the witch's cave.
"Gobbolino!"
Long before they arrived, they could hear the witch angrily calling for them.
"Why have you been dawdling out there?" she demanded. "Didn't you hear me calling for you? I want the little wooden horse to come for a ride on my broomstick."
The witch went to fetch her broomstick, and while her back was turned, the 2 friends tried to empty their jugs into the pumpkin. But they were too slow. Despite her bad eyesight, the witch saw that they were up to something. She came and poked at the pumpkin, which promptly fell over and emptied its contents on the floor.
"Well, you have been busy," she said as Gobbolino and the little wooden horse wept
tears of disappointment and sorrow into the pink mixture.
"Now, come along, Dobbin. Jump up behind me."
Very reluctantly, the little wooden horse climbed up behind her. But the broomstick would not leave the ground. The witch shook it and cursed at it and kicked it and finally flung it onto the floor. Only Gobbolino noticed that the spilt spellbreaker had touched the end of the broomstick. Even without a blessing, the mixture was strong enough to rob the broom of its magic.
"If my broomstick will not carry me, perhaps my horse will," shrieked the witch, leaping up on the back of the little wooden horse. "Up! Up! Up!" she yelled at him. "Up to the stars, my horse! Away!"
To his great surprise, the little wooden horse suddenly found himself rising into the air. The 2 rose higher and higher until the little wooden horse could see many miles of country below him. He saw the great plains with the village and the church tower standing out clearly in the moonlight. And there, about halfway between the village and Hurricane Mountain, he saw a small dot that might be a person making his way across the plain. And suddenly the little wooden horse realized that the bat had delivered her message. That moving dot was the old priest coming to help them. With the witch on his back, The little wooden horse whirled round and round the night sky, dashing past countless stars.
"Let's go higher!" screamed the witch.
And up they soared above Hurricane Mountain until the little wooden horse could see the whole of the magic circle. At night it burned with a fire that was completely invisible at sunrise. It was a beautiful sight, but it was also terrifying, for it meant that he and Gobbolino could never escape from the witch. Their only hope lay with the priest, who was on his way across the plain. With the help of his blessing, they might break the magic circle. The little wooden horse was beginning to feel very tired, but the witch would not hear of stopping until the sun's first rays appeared in the sky. Then, with a magnificent swoop, she brought the little wooden horse down onto the mountain right beside her cave.
"A wooden horse is better than a broomstick to ride," she cackled. "We shall have some magnificent journeys together."
And sitting down on her chair, she fell fast asleep. The little wooden horse ran to waken the sleeping Gobbolino.
"Come quickly, quickly! The good priest is on his way, and we must stop him before he tries to cross the magic circle."
The two friends rushed down the mountainside until, rounding the last bend in the path, they saw the priest hurrying towards them.
"No, no!" cried Gobbolino. "Don't come any nearer. You will be burnt by the witch's magic circle." "Say a blessing, say a blessing," called the little wooden horse. "It will help us to break the circle."
At this moment, the bats came flying out of their caves, and their shrill screams almost drowned the words of the little wooden horse. But at last, the priest understood what was wanted, and crossing himself, he uttered a blessing. Then, stepping forward, he found himself in a warm, invisible glow. Gobbolino and the little wooden horse could hardly believe their eyes. The priest was standing on the magic circle without being frizzled or burnt. They went forward to meet him and found that they too could comfortably stand on the circle.
"You can go through the witch's fire because you are perfectly good," explained the bats.
There was no time to lose if the three friends were to escape from the witch. So, with tired feet, they began to walk across the plain, not daring to look back until they reached the priest's house. Then, in the setting sun, they saw tongues of fire flashing around Hurricane Mountain, and Gobbolino's eyes filled with tears. He could not forget that although the witch cast terrible spells, she was also a lonely old woman. She had been deserted by everyone. Not even her cat Sutika was still with her. After a good night's sleep, Gobbolino and the little wooden horse were eager to begin the last stage of their journey home. "I feel I could trot 1,000 miles, said Gobbolino as they waved goodbye to the priest. "We'll be in the forest before sunset," cried the little wooden horse joyfully. The witch now seemed so far away that as they crossed the stream, they laughed at the sparkling ripples and pretended to chase the water rats. And then they suddenly heard a familiar sound, the far-off cry of hounds, which was rapidly coming nearer. Their hearts pounding with fear, they hid among the rocks. It was only when the pack was almost within sight that they burst out of their hiding place, clambered to the top of the bank, and had to gallop back across the plain. Panting, gasping, and limping, never pausing to look around or behind them, they ran until they reached Hurricane Mountain. They did not notice when the hounds stopped baying. They did not even notice that the magic circle no longer glowed in the darkness. More dead than alive, they flung themselves into the first cave they came to and fell into an exhausted sleep. When they woke, it was daylight. and they could see bats flying on and off the mountain as if there had never been a magic fire at all.
"The witch is finished," the bats called. "When she knew you were gone, she had a fit and fell down screaming. Her magic circle just vanished."
Gobbolino and the little wooden horse sprang to their feet and galloped up the mountainside to the witch's cave. At first, they thought the cold, still cave was empty. But then they saw something move in the shadows, and a long, sad face looked towards them.
"You've come back! You've come back!" a voice cried. "I thought you'd left me forever, and I was going to die of a broken heart. But I'll get better now. I'll never be lonely again."
Gobbolino and the little wooden horse did not tell her that they still wanted to go back home. Instead, they gave her some food and lit a fire under the cauldron, and by evening she was almost her old self. She was just picking up her book of spells when all three heard a meow from the entrance of the cave. It was Sutika. The witch shrieked with joy, and the next moment Sutika was in her arms.
"Oh, my dear mistress," cried Sutika. "You look so thin, so old, so pale, hardly a witch any longer." "I don't want to be a witch anymore. All I want is a little love and affection and a nice warm cave to live in."
"That's exactly what I want," said Sutika.
"I had a dreadful time in the outside world trying to find a home. Nobody wanted a witch's cat like me."
Then Sutika turned to Gobbolino.
"So you're still here, brother? Have you enjoyed being a witch's cat after all? These good friends have come to live with me forever," said the witch, "and I shall reward them as they deserve. Tell me, my little friends, what would you like me to do for you?"
"Please, Mom, we would like to go back home." The witch's face fell, but Sutika cackled with laughter.
"Let them go! Why keep them? I'll stay with you forever, mistress, I promise." "Then they can go," said the witch. "But first I want to make one last spell."
"No, thank you," said Gobbolino, edging towards the entrance of the cave. "I think we'll start on our journey now. Goodbye, Mom." "Goodbye, Sutika."
"Wait, wait!" cried the witch. "I only mean to help you. Quickly, Sutika, get the cauldron ready."
At these words, Gobbolino and the little wooden horse bolted out of the cave and hurtled down the steep path. "Stop!" shrieked the witch, and standing at the entrance of the cave, she hurled something from a wooden spoon. 1,000 rainbow-coloured drops fell on the back of the little wooden horse. And all at once, a most extraordinary sensation filled his body. He found himself lifting his wheels from the path.
"Gobbolino," he called, "I'm flying! Quickly, quickly, jump on my back!"
Gobbolino leapt onto his back, and he soared high into the air. As the witch and Sutika called goodbye, he headed off towards the plain. Soon they were flying over the church, the stream, and the circling pack of hounds. Then, just as the spell was beginning to wear off, they reached the forest. They landed on a carpet of pine needles and settled down to sleep under the watchful eyes of an owl. Towards morning, she left them to fly with a message to Uncle Pedar, the kind master of the little wooden horse. She carried another to Gobbolino's farm. So the very next day, when the two friends were walking through the forest, they heard a sound which made them stop in their tracks. It was the sound of children singing. With a cry of happiness, Gobbolino and the little wooden horse bounded forward and galloped along the path, straight into the loving arms of Uncle Pedar and the farm children. They were safely home at last.